world. Here we are. Well, today is going to be a different type of reading. Actually, I don't think we're going to get into a reading. I wanted to discuss a few things. Yeah, I'll just start at the beginning. Stick around if you choose. You don't have to, but this will probably be my last video. Potentially forever, or at least a long time. So firstly, I'm always grateful. I didn't start this channel other than to deal with my ongoing mental health crisis of what is referred to as post-separation abuse and NPD abuse. I've been very open about that. It's very real. And I think anyone suffering, it's great to find a creative outlet. And I also want to work on my perfectionism, so I was kind of hitting two birds with one stone and taking something that I really loved and sharing it, as well as using kind of the 12-step model of sharing your experience, your strength, and your hope. But along the way, I have consistently struggled with my feelings around YT as a platform, for one. How YouTube tarot card readings are very new and they're incredible, but like with anything, it's a double-edged sword. So we're going to kind of talk about a few things. But one of you had asked, either today or yesterday, why I desire to have a therapist when I'm doing tarot card readings. And I was already thinking about leaving this channel. And in fact, from its first iterations, like I have taken down my channel, I have made it so that I only posted a reading that stayed up for 24 hours with like no title. We'll get into that piece too, because it kind of ties into how can something be a divine tool when the whole platform of YouTube is based off of language models. It is not an accident that my videos find you, because everything that you type in and look for and hit a like on, and you have to understand that I also have my own background analytics, so like I understand how like the SEOs work, and like everything on YouTube and our social media is geared to be an echo chamber. It already knows what you want to hear. So even when I upload a video, it's scrubbing through the language, going ahead of time, yes, to look for problematic things, but it's also like looking to understand the content to find you specifically. So there's actually nothing spiritually divine in that process. And that to me is already problematic. Anyway, but I think starting off with the difference of therapy versus tarot cards, I think just talking about it practically, they're two completely different things. Like, completely. And not just tarot card readings, but if we were to use the model of spirituality, even religious, you know, whether you identify as religious or spiritual or both, to me that goes into the category of philosophy and existentialism. It's really geared towards having a foundation of being able to ask pertinent questions of like, why am I here? Why do I exist? Why do we all exist? What is the purpose? Versus a social science such as therapy. Like it literally is a social science. So it serves very different purposes. The other thing being is that because it's a social science, it's evidence-based. Do you know what I mean? Like, we've had it around long enough and it's always evolving, but there's parameters. There's also like an overseeing body that regulates it. And we have enough empirical data on one hand to know certain things now. We're like, okay, it's predictable, you know, whether it's like attachment styles, whatever. There's all different types of psychology for varying reasons. So my need, and it's not a desire, anyone who has experienced true narcissistic personality disordered abuse, aka, as they use in legalese in the courtrooms, high conflict, it is the longest form of torture. On a systemic level, it's hitting you on every front. And it's long term. It's not like you can escape. If you're co-parenting with one of these personality disordered people, you are locked in for years. It is an onslaught that never ends, and it's really nuanced because it interfaces with so many different aspects where there's then vicarious and lateral trauma and violence. So the courts, you know, it is absolutely vicarious trauma and violence because the courts are not trained, they don't know what to look for, it's classist, it's racist, it's misogynist, it's ableist. These are real systemic issues. When you get into predictable pathologies, because it is predictable, once you understand how they operate, there's a loss of community, there's the smear campaigns, and it's talked about so lightly, but it's absolutely eviscerating, especially as social creatures, to lose community, not just one person. There's like so much grief, there's so much trauma, there's so much isolation, whatever. It goes on and on and on, and usually you're not safe. Like, it just, the list goes on and on. So like, it's not a desire, it's a need. I desperately need help to cope with the magnitude of this situation. And tarot is meant, it's a divine tool, yes, but really it's, again, it's going more into the realm of like, it's there for practical guidance, for, you know, to ask philosophical questions of like, what is blocking me? What is coming towards me that I can't see, that I, you know, like, you know, it's really turned into like a whole love fest, but it really, it's meant to be a tool, and like anything, it can be abused, it can be misused, but to me, two separate categories. But I think it's an important conversation because my biggest issue is no matter what your station is in life, if you have any kind of influence or sway over people, you have a responsibility. And this is something that I've been thinking a lot of since starting this channel and seeing it kind of grow and seeing the responses, both good and bad and neutral. And I say all of these things moving forward into this conversation, just know that for one, if you've been around the channel, I am all about inclusivity. There's no judgment here, even if I'm getting fussy about personality disordered people. At the end of the day, though, I believe in inclusivity. I believe that everyone deserves the opportunity to receive guidance and help and to hear their story told. But that being said, well, for one, YouTube, like, are tarot card readings addictive? Absolutely. And I mentioned this in a reading actually a few months ago because I actually had been meditating and Spirit was like pointing out that because there's literally no parameters on YouTube, so we'll use the content of tarot card readings because it does seem to be the one that people are most talking about in terms of addiction. But porn addiction and tarot card readings, it's unlimited. It's like a smorgasbord of, you can sit all day, all night, and just take in content. You don't have to pay for it. It's free. You don't have to do anything. You can just consume. And I'm not the only one talking about this. There's other readers that feel a sense of responsibility and are questioning it. There are people who are actively having discussions around their own addiction to tarot card readings. When I was in school 10 years ago, even though it was art school, I was writing a lot of papers on post-humanism, meaning humans' relationship to technology. And, it can go in a lot of directions. And yes, it was around art, but through that it led through a lot of research. And in my research 10 years ago, what was being written about was that we were starting to already make correlations between specific social media sites and specific forms of mental illness in different age ranges and, from kids to adults. But the biggest issue with technology is that we have this propensity for creating technology that moves at incredible speeds that we can't keep up with. We haven't had the time to even ask the questions of, like, what are the long-term effects, like neuroscience. So we know that there's a huge impact. We know that socially it's affecting us. We know that the data is not good. And when you start to also then get into the realm of, again, the numbers are going up. Don't take my word for it. Get on the internet and research it. You have issues like limerence, transference, spiritual psychosis. Now with AI, they're now seeing AI psychosis. These are real things affecting real people in real time. And going back to when you have influence or sway over people, I believe we all carry a personal responsibility to keep ourselves in check and ask ourselves, how is this landing? Who am I impacting? Who am I not considering? So for instance, I have always done personal readings. Like, the YouTube tarot thing is so new. I didn't even know existed up until, a few years ago when my son was born, COVID, And from my own spiritual ethics, this isn't necessarily coming from anyone else, but people that I have learned and spent time with, is that I have absolutely refused to do readings for people in person, because even just off of an energy, I can tell, because I'm always asking myself, is this person ready to receive whatever comes through? And I always tell people, like, don't ask if you're not willing to hear the truth, because again, we all usually have an expectation of what we want to hear versus like what's going to come through. The other thing about doing in-person readings is that it's tailored to you. Doing general readings for thousands of people is very interesting, but there's a lot of potential for things to get lost in translation. It's not tailored to just you. The other thing is that historically, it, again, being a divining tool, you need to treat it with respect. You're not going to want to hear this, but I'm not here to placate and massage egos, essentially. This is real stuff. It's a divining tool, and it should be met with respect. So historically, you would maybe go once or twice a year, if that, to a person with something really plaguing you, and it would be after you putting in some effort yourself, praying to whoever you pray to, maybe making an offering, and really seeking, before you go to someone, doing a bit of footwork yourself. And then if still at a loss, you would go to seek the counsel of whomever, but in this case we'll say tarot card reader. So for me, there's already a problem with the fact that I can't control, and it's not my job. It's not my job. I do think it is. Some responsibility falls onto myself, but to be taking in content outside of spirituality, it's a loop. It is a loop cycle. And if then we add language models, AI, that's an echo chamber that's feeding you what you want to hear, and it's keeping you in a loop, it means, because ask yourself, are you seeing the results? Are you seeing the results? Yes, I might get some things about you correct, but everyone's asking about love. But I'm telling you right now, ask once and let it go. If you're asking again and again and again and again, I can tell you right now, my own experience of how the laws of spirituality work, when you treat a tool, even if it's not intentional but flippant, that it's like, yeah, you're treating it like candy, you're just gobbling, it is not going to work for you. The messages will get distorted, and you're also not in trust and faith. Going back to Brene Brown, going back to the idea of like vulnerability and courage, but like the need to know all the time is not being courageous. Is coming from a mindset of power and control. I need to know at all times the outcomes. It's not for us to know all the time. It just isn't. So when I think about the fact that I can't refuse people readings, that does bother me at this point, because I have to ask myself, what is my intention? You know, even going into school to be a psychologist, it really is about taking an oath to do no harm. And while I don't think that there's anything harmful in the act of tarot itself, I do think the platform of YouTube, because also it's corporate, it wants to make money. It doesn't care. It's not a spiritual tool. And it is an echo chamber. It knows more about you and what you're looking for than you probably do. Like, it's locked in on you in ways that is creepy as fuck, to be honest. The other thing is that there's no reference for me on who may have a history of mental health and addiction. And these are real things, because as we're seeing, like, spiritual psychosis is real, AI psychosis is real, and there's no shame around that. I have so many friends that are bipolar. I have just as many family members and friends with like schizoid in that spectrum. I myself have struggled with mental health, so it's not about making anyone feel uncomfortable here, but if this is about actually seeking the truth, then we need to be able to have real conversations. And I always say that if your reaction is to click off or to like hit the dislike button or flag one of my videos, which has come up, because you don't like hearing something, like, look at your reactions, because your reactions usually tell you a lot about what is honest and true. I'm gonna say this with as much delicacy and tact, but it won't have been my first time. Like, the fact that I know for a fact, and not just one person, but it's now been a few, where people truly think that in my readings, I'm talking about me and them, that it's not some vague thing, that I'm secretly talking about that person and me falling in love and being together. And that's a lot of responsibility. And it's not just me, guys. I check in on other readers that I really respect their messages, who have huge followings, like massive. And touching back upon limerence, transference, again, there's no shame. It happens to the best of people, but it's something that we really need to be discussing for both people involved. So I need to make it very clear that if at any time you have felt that when I was doing a reading that I was specifically talking about me and you have to know that is 100% not the case, and I'm not doing that to embarrass anyone or to shame anyone. And you can always reach out to email me. I have a list of resources. My goal is to make sure that everyone is safe and also can receive the things that they want. Everyone wants to be loved. Everyone wants love in their life. I know everyone wants a partner too, but like, we just have to keep it real. And as much as I am very rooted in my own spiritual faith, I also keep it deeply 2 firm feet on the ground of practical, and definitely leaning into psychology. And my own experience has been that I need to have my life rounded out by all the things, even in different therapies. You know, talk therapy is great for one specific type of thing, and I do think it should have an expiry date, but there's so many modalities of therapists and therapies. I really love the 12 steps, and I really love spiritual communities, albeit I'm always keeping it real too, to be like, you really need to be mindful of who you give your power away to. And I'm always going to tell you here first, do not give away your power to people, places, and things. You know, I would much rather you guys actually go get a tarot card deck. And I always tell you, you do not need any fancy regalia. You do not need crystals. You do not need incense. All you need is your bare ass, your heart, and commune from honesty. Start with that. Everyone has the means, in the spiritual sense, to receive guidance. You don't need me to do it. So that being said, I also don't believe, just like people, places, and things, there are a lot of brilliant tarot card readers, and there are some that I would say, like, very dangerous messaging. Like, I do not talk about twin flames. If that's what you want to believe in, great. I'm going to talk about why language. Actually, there's some really great stuff on the forensics of, like, cult language, if you want to get into linguistics and cults, because spiritual groups fall into this. So I watched a documentary out of Canada that just came out on the twin flame cult. It's fucking terrifying. And, you know, language is interesting, but even with, like, language around divine feminine, divine masculine, like, guys, I don't mind a love reading, but everything that I've heard talked about in terms of the twin flame, to me, sounds toxic as fuck. I'm just gonna keep it real. You also have to ask yourself, when did the term twin flame enter popular vernacular? Meaning, when did that term come in? Now, here's the thing. Everyone references, it comes from Plato's, is it the Symposium? But he was talking about how he believed that the original humans had basically 4 of everything, you know, 4 legs, 4 arms. And so there was this idea of a splitting of the soul, whatever. But more to the point, if you research When did twin flame enter popular vernacular? Like, where does it come from? You'll see it's 20th century, but it really became popular in the 70s. A white woman, oh, look at that, who then, popularized it, and then people run with it. Everything that I've heard about it is just, to me, toxic as fuck. If you want to do an avoidant chasing, like two people who just appear avoidant to me, like one just chases and then when the other one's ready, like that to me sounds toxic as fuck. And that's why it's also great to have a therapist to bounce these ideas off of. When I hear readings about the divine feminine, divine masculine, and I will admit, there was a point where the algorithms got me and I saw, oh, people seem to only understand if, like, we're talking about a divine femme, but as I've been sitting with it, I'm like, for one, people don't belong to us. They don't. So, like, if you're not with someone, they don't belong to you. So they're not yours. When you bring in and use particular words, and that's why if you look at the linguistics of cults, it's very interesting. That's why I also don't call us a fam. I try to be very particular, and I've definitely slipped up. I've forgotten, that how things can impact people, and it's important. And again, because we have science that studies and researches this. This isn't pseudoscience. This is like, you can look it up, you can see research maps, like it's measurable. So yeah, I think about these things. Let's see. Even the language of manifestation, tarot and spirituality fits into this. And yes, it's such a fine line, but this is why I think it's important to think about our responsibility and also, like, where is it landing? Because yeah, some people might be able to understand the nuance of, like, loosely talking about manifestation, but here's the thing, and this is where, again, like, I like things grounded in research, things that have been written about, but the idea that, like, one can just, like, ascend and manifest, like, everything without understanding very real structures, like systemic oppression, systemic barriers. And if you're not sure what that means, it's basically talking about things like institutions, that the world has been designed specifically for one type of demographic. And if you don't fit that demographic, the systemic barriers being racism, ableism, classism, and they intersect. So when you use the language of manifestation, it's really harmful because, for one, it puts the sole responsibility on you. And if you aren't seeing the results, it's because you just didn't manifest hard enough. Whereas for some people who are falling through very real cracks that exist for a reason, again, it's been studied, it's been talked about, like, you just have to step outside for a hot second and get a finger on the pulse and ask also marginalized people, because that's basically what it is. So to just tell a world full of marginalized people who are experiencing some very real systemic barriers to be like, you just have to think positive. And it's not to say that our thoughts don't shape certain things. They do. We know this. Again, neural pathways, neuroplasticity, their spirituality and science do intersect, but it's a very fine line. And because there's so much isolation occurring, and also going back to governing bodies, like life coaches, spiritual gurus, they literally are just any fucking Joe Blow that can say whatever the fuck they want. They're acting as therapists. Very rarely do they have a background where they are, like, trauma informed. Like, the list goes on and on and on. And what you do tend to find, and why cults and then personality disorders, is because you do tend to find very unwell people pretending to know what the fuck they're talking about. And that's why I'm not trying to discourage anyone, but it's also just like pay your due diligence, research, look up people, you know, like have a foot in, have a foot out. Yeah. Let's see, what else? I wrote some notes. This is the other thing. I think a lot of people mistake learning about things as the same as application. The beginning to understanding is, again, through learning. So you learn about either a topic or a philosophy, a way of life, whatever. But going back to, again, the difference of like therapy models, you need to be challenged. You can't grow in a vacuum. And if you're not being challenged, and challenge doesn't need to sound as harsh as it sounds, but if I go to a therapist and I'm talking out some things, the thing is, you can't see the forest for the trees. There has been so many things because of how I was raised, the environments. You have to remember, most of your belief systems don't even come from you. They come from your family, again, external influences, but then you have to ask yourself, like, wow, I'm operating 90% of the time off of things that I'm like literally not aware of. So it's really important to have different types of people who are also trained and have experience in challenging beliefs, behaviors, thoughts, patterns. It goes on and on. And it doesn't mean that you have to agree with them, but if you're never being challenged, and again, the echo chamber of how the internet and social media works, you're just being spoon-fed what you want to hear. So there's nothing challenging at all. And I don't believe that you can grow to your fullest abilities in that type of environment. But that's also where I believe in a balance, you know, having a real solid spiritual community. I can't stress enough why I love Buddhism. The fact that they consider themselves more of a philosophy, but their main thing is, A, apply to your life. If it doesn't work, again, results-based. Take their teachings, their philosophy, apply it to your life, learn, but if it's not working, move on. And they have their own saying too, like if you meet the Buddha along your path, like kill him. Like this idolatry, we give our power away to people. It's so dangerous. But I do believe in spirituality. But again, fine line. There must be absolute discernment. And even within my own faith, I would really encourage you to question your beliefs all the time. Don't rest on your laurels. Play the game of like, what if I were wrong? What would that look like? What would that mean for me? If you're unwilling to ask hard questions and still be curious, be open enough to being wrong, or to be like, you know what? I don't know if this belief system serves me anymore. But going back to like learning something and knowing of something is very different than continuous applied action. So I like using the model of 12 steps as well as therapy, because what you put in is what you get out. If you do the bare minimum, you might do better than you were before, but it really requires you to do the work. You can listen to all the podcasts, read all the books. It's not the same as doing the work. Just in the ways that all of my unhealthy family members who became therapists all chose to really not do therapy. They might have done it for one hot second, but their refusal to be like, I know better than, they're some of the most toxic, harmful people I have met. And as much as I love therapy, like my goal is to make sure that the research that I do is part of like a model that will be used in the future to also identify personality disordered people, but in all structures. I don't think it's enough to just have people become therapists. A lot of therapists can be really unhealthy, to be honest, because again, they haven't done the work, but they thought that if they became a social worker or a therapist, it would be the equivalent of them doing the work on themselves. It's not the same thing. Let's see. That's basically the gist of it. But at the end of the day, I say all of this because what I want for myself is what I want for others. I see people really struggling. I know that tarot card readings can bring hope, but you need to ask yourself real questions and be honest. Like, how many hours of your day go towards YouTube tarot card readings? If you were to measure it, if you were to replace a reading with a beer or a shot of alcohol, add it up. Anything that is mood altering. And guys, like, I'm also putting myself, like, when I first discovered tarot card readings on YouTube, for one, as a tarot card reader, I was like, this is phenomenal. And they were deadly accurate, and that also blew me away. But it was also in the hardest times of my life, and I absolutely leaned in. And while there's a lot that they got right, there's also a lot that tarot card readers aren't going to get right. Like, here's the thing, it doesn't matter how good of a reader you are. As soon as you have knowledge of a potential outcome, you have the potential to change that outcome. That's just straight facts. And again, when you abuse a spiritual tool, it can, like, that's why I mentioned in an older reading, but pendulums, they don't work for me anymore. I abuse that power, asking it stupid questions. And now it's not my gift. It won't allow me to. It will give me every wrong answer. So for myself, I personally am off watching tarot card readings. I am asking my own tarot cards with specific members on my spirit team for very specific answers around, like, very practical things, but yeah, like being like, what is currently blocking me, or like what is it that I'm enacting right now that's not my highest and greatest good? You know, what am I not willing to look at? What do I need to know that's coming up that, you know? But even then, it's like, it's good to take a break. Even in medicine, if you think about efficacy, you need to always put a pause in medicinal interactions, whether it's like allopathic or holistic. You never want to consume something every single day. It loses its efficacy. So putting space between the oneness and really just asking yourself, like, with anything that's addictive, I've said this before around cannabis, I get really honest with myself, asking myself, am I looking to check out? Am I looking to deal with, like, actual pain management, which I have a prescription for through my doctor with my injuries? Or am I using this as a spiritual tool? And more often than not, because I haven't had access to mental health resources, it really has been acting as a mental health to just keep it even, Steven. And there have been days where I'm like, I'm 100% checking out. 100%. It's too much today. All I can say is you need to be willing. If what you say is that you're seeking truth and guidance through this particular medium, you know, I don't know. You gotta ask yourself the hard questions. You gotta be willing to look at it And you don't need to be harsh in your judgment. It's just about acknowledging and then asking yourself, like, what results do you want? If you're continuously asking about an ex or a future relationship and it's in a loop, I'm telling you right now, just even from like a growing perspective of someone who's grown a lot of plants, I can tell you right now, you can plant a seed and stare at it till the cows come home. It is not going to make it grow any faster. In fact, you're probably going to impede it. Like, you gotta back away. No one wants to be micromanaged. So, yeah, I do feel a responsibility, and it does weigh on me that I don't know who is taking in my content. I don't know their history, and to think that I could be contributing to someone's a delusion, for sure, it weighs on me. And as you've seen, I did not start this channel for numbers. In fact, I don't want this channel to really grow anymore as it is, because, you know, I've seen it from a lot of content creators, not just tarot card readers. Like, there's a ton of you that are so lovely, and even the ones that are troubled, you're lovely too, but, you know, I'm a parent first. And I can tell you right now, I've heard of some content creators where they're like, I'm quitting the channel because I've grown too much, and while it is nice to be acknowledged in public, you know, not everyone has the wherewithal to understand that, like, this is essentially a job, and that when I'm in my real life or when they're on their real life, like, don't approach when there's kids. Don't approach, you know, even the romantic stuff. I see it all the time, and this goes back to limerence. A lot of people are now just watching tarot card readers because they're limerenced out on the tarot card reader, and they're obsessing, and they're harassing. A reader that I follow posted something recently where they acknowledged, they're like, you know, I love the community, but many of you have reached out and stated, again, not even asking, but like being like, you and me are supposed to be together, and getting really aggressive about it. And that's problematic. I'm very open about, like, I've experienced the worst of the worst in people. I'm currently still being stalked. I've been stalked by my mom as a therapist. She had a very dangerous man that who saw a photo of me as a child and managed to figure out who I was and stalked me. So I take these things very seriously. And with all of those combined ingredients, and also just the fact that, like, I'm up to my eyeballs in assholes in terms of, like, I have to deal with someone right now that's untenable. I'm trying to co-parent with someone who's not safe. I'm always in and out of court. I'm about to I've applied to be in, you know, a really long school program that's going to require all of my attention between dealing with all of that. And then when I think about this, it just, like, it doesn't feel very good, because it was never about the money. I don't care about money. It's not why I started the channel. Yeah, is it nice to receive? Yeah, because normally when I do tarot, like any job that I do, I get paid. And yeah, at this point, if I'm to be honest, it doesn't align with my values. I'm not making judgments on anyone else. You are free to all do what you need to do. Same with other readers. I get it. But I'm always about holding up your own receipts. You gotta ask yourself, if this is what I believe, am I demonstrating my beliefs? And yeah, my beliefs right now say, like, I don't want to contribute to someone's limerence. I don't want to contribute to people's looping. And I definitely don't want to contribute to not seeing the truth as it really is. So, as much as I love and have loved doing this channel and connecting with all of you, I need to do something different. If you want to book one-to-one, you can. I always say it still holds that I always reserve the right to deny a reading if I feel like it's just energetically not a good fit or it's not the right time. But I do like doing one-to-one. I'm still going to be doing less of it, to be honest, but it's still an option. If when I'm in school, I may just stop doing readings altogether because of time and energy. But yeah. So, gang, if you made it this far, my heart wants what your heart wants at the end of the day. I trust and hope that you will find all the things that you're looking for. I encourage you to stay curious. I encourage you to get your own tarot decks. Talk to your spirit team. Talk to your grandmas or ancestors. It's all here for you, and I'm telling you, it's way more empowering to trust your own intuition and your spirit team. That's where you're going to get the most accuracy. And I encourage you, also, you don't need to be a hot mess to have a therapist. P.S. That is an outdated model. But most people, I mean, we are living in a time of like 8 billion genocides being live streamed every second of the day, people starving, just a hot mess. Again, we've never really seen anything like this because also of technology. So like, it's a hard time, and it's gonna get harder. And it will get better, but like, so don't be afraid to lean on those things. And I've said it before too, therapists are just like any relationship. You gotta date a few. You might go to one and be like, oh my God, I interview the therapist that I'll be working with this week. I would love it. It could be a long-term relationship, but like, I've interviewed her. We'll see how it goes. If she doesn't cut the mustard, letting her go and on to the next one, interviewing them. You gotta find the right fit. And it takes a bit of time. Sometimes you hit it right out of the park, sometimes you don't. But it's worth it. Okay. On that note, stay blessed, stay golden.